going to need to join me on a journey through time as we explore all the musical eras from early medieval times all the way through to the 20th century. Are you ready? I have my time machine ready and we're going to go there now. Welcome into my time machine. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking it's just my car and I've just sellotaped a giant calculator to the dashboard. But it is in fact my time machine. And we're going to use my time machine in order to travel back in time. So the first musical era I want to travel back to is the medieval era. And the medieval era is approximately from the 500s to the 1400s. That's a really long time ago. Let's go somewhere sort of in the middle. What about the 1200s? So I'm going to type that into my calculator, my time machine. Switch it on. It's exciting. 1200 to the 1200s. Are you ready? Let's go back in time to the medieval era. Go. The medieval era was from the 500s to the 1400s. That is a huge amount of time that's all been labelled the medieval era. It's almost 1,000 years worth of music. Amazing. During the medieval era, a lot of music was being created in cathedrals, churches and holy places. And some of the most famous music were called Gregorian chants or plain song because they were sung during church services. At the time, there was a pope in Italy called Gregory I. They named the chants after Gregory, so they're called Gregorian chants. I know, imaginative name, right? They sound quite soothing, as because they're being sung in such large places, often dome-like structures or cathedrals, the words tend to blur into each other, so they can sound really soothing. A bit like this. Hello Galaxy, Margarita pizza with extra cheese, chocolate, 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 chocolate. At your own Gregorian chant. Maybe sing about your favourite food. Pick a really echoey place in the kitchen and see if you can recreate the same sort of music. Technically, instruments like the double bass weren't invented yet. Oh! Oh! What? No way! I'm off to the Renaissance period. Maybe they've got basses there. So the next period of music we're going to travel to is the Renaissance era. This was a time of musical history and in art and literature where everything got far more flamboyant. The Renaissance era is between the 1400s to the 1600s. So let's go somewhere in the middle again, the 1500s. Let's type that into my time machine. And off we go. We've arrived. We're now in the Renaissance era. The Renaissance era was roughly from the 1400s to the 1600s. Most of the music in the Renaissance era was still being sung in holy places, but was also being composed for very wealthy people, like kings and queens, dukes and duchesses, so they could have music whilst they were having their banquets or parties. And printing had been invented, so it wasn't always handwritten either. It was becoming quicker to write down music. During this era, as with literature and art, everything became even more embellished. Nothing was very simple. And so one simple line of music to suddenly create interweaving lines that sounded hugely complicated. This is a piece of Palestrina composed for choir, but I'm going to play it on the double bass, the coolest instrument. invented. Woof! Oh, God, not again. Are you joking? Oh my goodness. Well, I'm going to go to the Baroque era now, and hopefully double basses will have been invented by then. Okay, we're back in the car. Time machine. And the next era we're going to go to is the Baroque era. The Baroque era was roughly from the 1600s to 1750s. During the Baroque era of music, a really famous composer lived, Johann Sebastian Bach. Let's go to the day when he was born, which is the 31st of March 1685. Let's go there now. So, 31st of March 1685. Wow. Off we go. We've arrived. We are in the Baroque era. And I think I can hear Johann Sebastian Bach, or at least a baby that's just been born. Bach was one of 8 children, and he himself had 20 children, although only 10 survived. And most of these children were musicians themselves. During the Baroque era, music again was really quite complex, but a lot of it was being composed for instruments, woodwinds, brass and strings. And yes, the first double basses had finally been invented. Hello, we interrupt this fantastic video to bring you some breaking news. Why did the pianist keep banging his head against the piano? Because he was playing by ear. Back to you, me, back to you. Are we done with the breaking news? This is a piece by Bach. Came the classical era. Let's go there now. The next period of musical history we're going to travel to is the classical era. The classical era was roughly from the 1750s to the 1800s, and this part of musical history was a really famous composer called Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. He lived during this time. Now, I reckon we should go back to, let's say, a year before Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart passed away. So that would have been 1790. Let's go there now. 179. Let's go. Oh my goodness. What's going on? I missed off a 0. I've gone back way too far. I've gone back to the year 179, the year of giant cats. Oh my goodness, let's get out of here. Quick, add a 0. Oh gosh, 1790. Oh God. That was so close. So now we're in the classical era in 1790, 1 year before Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart passed away. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart was very famous for some very famous tunes. This one is called Eine kleine Nachtmusik, and you might recognise it. Amazingly, Mozart was only 5 years old when he wrote his first piece of music. Eine kleine Nachtmusik he still wrote in his 30s, but 5 years old is very young for your first piece of music. Why don't you try writing your own composition on your instruments at home? By this period of music, compositions were complex but often had a form or a pattern. So they would start with an opening motif like and then the music would develop, the motif would change a little bit, and then it would return at the end, the recap. Chords were used to thicken the sound of the music. Next musical era we're going to go to is the Romantic Era. Let's go there now before the Sturm und Drang, or storm and drama, of the late classical era kicks off.
Okay, the Romantic period was roughly from the 1800s to 1910, or beginning of the 20th century. Let's go for around the middle, so 1850. 1850. Off we go.
During the Romantic era, music was being used to describe all sorts of stories, dreams, poetry, artwork. It was a really luscious time. Orchestras and ensembles were getting bigger and better, and new versions of instruments were being created. This is a seriously romantic melody from Tchaikovsky's Romeo and Juliet Overture. But we've got one more era of music to visit, the 20th century. Now, this is a crazy time for music. Let's go there now.
So the 20th century was a whirlwind of all different types of music. There were many experiments during this era, both in terms of technology and music composition. 1920 seems like a quite good year to go to. It's after the First World War and before the Second World War. 1920. So, 1920. Let's go.
Right, we're here. We're in the 20th century. We're very early on in the 20th century. So many experimentations with types of composing, so many experiments with technology. And then, of course, we've got all the rock bands, the jazz, all different genres of music that start appearing. Some composers were composing by numbers, so they would number all the notes of the scale and then jumble them up and then play them and see what it sounded like. Some people would compose by putting various objects inside pianos or on strings and seeing what that sounded like. Some composers composed music so wild they caused riots. It was certainly an exciting time. There were beautiful and there were fun melodies.
so much for joining me on my time travelling through all the musical eras, right from the medieval to the 20th century. I'm going to go back to the present day. Let's go. If you like it, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I'll see you soon.
The bass is the coolest instrument in the world.